I wasn't supposed to read Rule 8. Officially, it didn't exist. Every ranger at Yosemite received the same laminated card on their first day. 7 rules. Nothing more. They looked strange enough that most new hires assumed they were part of an old park tradition, a scare tactic to keep rookies alert during night patrols. I thought the same thing, until my second day, until I watched a veteran ranger pull another card from inside his wallet. A faded one, older, worn from years of being unfolded. There were 8 rules on his. When he realized I'd seen it, his face drained of color. He folded it shut before I could read the last line. Then he said something that made absolutely no sense. You weren't supposed to know there was another one. I laughed. I only saw the number. He didn't laugh back. No, you saw too much already. 3 nights later, I learned why nobody talks about Rule 8. Because if you ever have to read it, you're already the one it's written for. My name is Mason Carter. Before Yosemite, I'd spent 8 years working seasonal jobs across different national parks. Yellowstone, Olympic, Rocky Mountain. I dealt with wildfires, flash floods, missing hikers, and more black bears than I could count. Nature never bothered me. It followed rules. Storms came for reasons. Animals behaved like animals. If something happened, there was usually an explanation waiting somewhere. Yosemite destroyed that belief within a week. Orientation was almost disappointingly normal. Radio procedures, wildlife encounters, medical emergencies, visitor management, trail closures. Nothing unusual. The strange part came after everyone else had left. Chief Ranger Daniel Brooks called me into his office. He was somewhere in his late 50s. Gray beard, deep lines around his eyes. He looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in years. Without saying much, he slid a laminated card across the desk. 7 numbered rules, typed neatly. No signatures, no official logo. I started reading. Rule 1. Never answer a whistle that comes from above the tree line after sunset. Rule 2. If another ranger says your full name during a night patrol, ask for their badge number before responding. Rule 3. Do not enter abandoned fire lookout towers after midnight, even if dispatch orders you to. Rule 4. If you find fresh boot prints leading away from a closed trail, photograph them. Do not follow them. Rule 5. If every bird suddenly becomes silent, stop walking immediately. Count slowly to 50 before taking another step. Rule 6. Never look directly into a cave if you hear someone breathing inside. Rule 7. If Chief Brooks personally tells you to go home, leave immediately. Do not argue. I looked up. Interesting welcome packet. Brooks didn't smile. Carry it. Seriously? Every day. You expect me to memorize this? No. I expect you to survive long enough to. I assumed it was some elaborate hazing ritual. Every workplace has traditions. Maybe this was Yosemite's. Later that afternoon, I met my patrol partner, Ranger Ava Morales. She'd been stationed there for almost 11 years. Quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed details everyone else missed. As we loaded gear into the truck, I showed her the rule card. She glanced at it, folded it back, handed it to me. Don't lose it. You actually believe these? I don't. You follow them? Every single one. What? She shut the truck door. Because everyone who stopped, she paused, isn't here anymore. Our first patrol covered several miles of hiking trails north of Yosemite Valley. Most visitors had already returned to campgrounds before sunset. The forest became quieter with every passing minute. I love that hour. The moment when daytime sounds slowly disappeared, whined through pine branches. The smell of damp earth, cold mountain air. Perfect. Around dusk, Ava suddenly stopped walking. She raised one finger. I listened. Nothing. What? She whispered. Exactly. It took me a second. There were no birds. Not one. No squirrels. No insects. The forest hadn't become quiet. It had become empty. Ava looked down at her watch. Count. What? To 50. I almost laughed. Then, something heavy moved somewhere behind the trees. Not running. Walking. Slowly. One step. Then another. Large enough that each footfall vibrated faintly beneath my boots. Still no birds. Still no insects. Only footsteps. I counted. 23. 24. 25. The footsteps stopped. 32, 33, 34. A branch snapped somewhere behind us. Neither of us turned around. 48, 49, 50. Immediately, the birds began singing again, like someone had flipped a switch. The forest came back to life. Ava finally started walking. What was that? She answered without looking back. You counted. Good. Now don't ask. The next morning, I checked wildlife reports. Nothing. No bears. No elk. No mountain lions. No unusual activity anywhere near our patrol route. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Until lunch. I walked into the ranger station break room. Two veteran rangers stopped talking the moment they saw me. One of them looked at Ava. He counted. She nodded once. Both men looked relieved. Neither explained why. That evening, dispatch received an emergency call. A family reported their teenage son missing near an old maintenance road, closed since the early 1990s. Search teams mobilized immediately. This was exactly the kind of work I'd spent years doing. Within 30 minutes, we reached the search area. The missing boy's parents waited beside an ambulance. His mother couldn't stop crying. His father kept repeating the same sentence. He heard somebody calling him. Ava froze. What exactly did he hear? The father swallowed. He said, someone knew his name. Ava quietly turned toward me, then toward Chief Brooks. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Brooks issued an order that shocked me. No vocal searches. One ranger frowned. What? No shouting. No calling the victim's name. We search in silence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Chief, he's 14. If he's injured, Brooks interrupted me. If he's still alive, he'll come to us. I stared at him. This wasn't search and rescue protocol. This wasn't even common sense. Yet, not one ranger argued. Instead, every single one quietly switched off the loudspeakers they'd brought for the search. And we entered the forest, without calling for the missing boy even once. About 40 minutes later, my flashlight swept across a muddy stretch of trail. Fresh footprints. Small. Probably the teenagers. They continued straight ahead. Then, another set appeared beside them. Bare feet. Adult-sized. Perfectly clean. No mud clung to them despite the soaked ground. They walked alongside the boy's tracks for nearly 20 yards. Then, the boy's footprints simply stopped. Not turned. Not double back. Stopped. Only the barefoot tracks continued deeper into the trees. I crouched beside them, trying to understand what I was seeing. Ava grabbed my shoulder, so suddenly I nearly fell. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mason! I looked up. She wasn't staring at the footprints anymore. She was staring into the darkness ahead. I followed her gaze. About 50 yards away, standing perfectly still between two enormous pine trees, was a park ranger. Green uniform, campaign hat, hands folded behind his back, watching us. The problem was, every ranger assigned to the search was standing behind me. For a second, I convinced myself it had to be another search team. Yosemite was huge. Multiple crews often worked the same incident. But something about him was wrong. He wasn't holding a flashlight. He wasn't carrying a radio. He wasn't even wearing a backpack. Just a perfectly clean ranger uniform. Perfectly polished boots. Perfect posture, as if he'd stepped out of an old recruitment photograph. Ava slowly moved in front of me. Don't wave. I wasn't going to. Don't speak either. The ranger lifted one hand. Not in greeting. He crooked a single finger, inviting us closer. Chief Brooks noticed him a second later. I expected him to radio the other teams. Instead, he quietly said, "Everyone back up." Nobody questioned the order. 6 experienced rangers began walking backward together, never taking their eyes off the figure. I followed. The stranger never moved, never blinked. He simply watched. When we'd backed away nearly 100 yards, he disappeared, not by walking. One moment he stood between the trees. The next, there was only empty forest. No footsteps, no broken branches, nothing. The search continued until after midnight. We found the missing boy sitting beside an old granite outcrop almost 2 miles from where he'd vanished. He wasn't injured. He wasn't cold. He wasn't even scared. He looked confused. A medic wrapped him in a blanket while Chief Brooks knelt beside him. What happened? The boy frowned. I was following the ranger. Every conversation around us stopped. What ranger? The one with the old hat. He said you were looking for me. My stomach tightened. Chief Brooks kept his voice calm. What did he look like? The boy smiled faintly. Like you. Brooks didn't react. What happened then? He stopped walking. Why? He said I wasn't supposed to see where he lives. The smile disappeared. Then he heard you coming. The boy looked directly at Chief Brooks. He was angry. Nobody asked another question. The search ended immediately. The family was reunited. Official paperwork listed the incident as a disoriented juvenile wandering off trail. Nothing unusual. Nothing supernatural. By sunrise, it was just another closed case. Except it wasn't. Because before leaving the station, Chief Brooks quietly removed the missing person report from the filing cabinet, fed every page into the office shredder. I confronted Ava after breakfast. What the hell was that? She sighed. You really want the answer? Yes. No. I deserve one. She looked around to make sure nobody stood nearby. Then she quietly asked, have you noticed something strange about the ranger station? I frowned. No. Count the lockers. I laughed. What? Just do it. There were 23 lockers lining one wall. Easy enough. Except, personnel records listed only 22 active rangers. I counted again. 23. Someone retired? No. Transferred? No. So whose locker is that? Ava looked away. We stopped asking. That evening the rain finally arrived. Heavy mountain rain. The kind that turns trails into rivers within minutes. Storm patrols were miserable. Cold. Wet. Visibility almost non-existent. Around 8:30 dispatch radioed our truck. Unit 4. Ava answered. Go ahead. Possible vehicle stranded near Glacier Point Road. Copy. As she turned the truck around, the radio crackled again. Mason. I froze. Dispatch had used my first name. Not my call sign. Not Unit 4. Just Mason. I reached for the microphone. Ava slapped my hand away. Hard. What? She shook her head violently. The radio repeated itself. Mason. Her voice sounded exactly like dispatcher Karen. Perfectly normal. Mason, are you there? I looked at Ava. She whispered. Badge number. I remembered Rule 2. If another ranger says your full name during a night patrol, ask for their badge number before responding. My throat felt dry. I picked up the microphone. Dispatch. State your badge number. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then, a voice answered. It was still Karen. But somehow, it sounded disappointed. You remembered. The transmission ended. Every light on the radio panel went dark. The unit had completely lost power. We reached Glacier Point Road 30 minutes later. No stranded vehicle. No tire tracks. Nothing. Just rain. As we prepared to leave, a flashlight flashed 3 times from deep inside the forest. Then twice. Then once. Ava stared at it. That's not Morse. No, it isn't. The light flashed again. This time closer. Whoever held it wasn't walking. The beam glided smoothly between trees, without bouncing, without changing height, like it wasn't being carried by a person at all. Ava quietly started the truck. We're done. The flashlight suddenly stopped. Then, another appeared. Then another. 5 lights. 7. 12. Dozens. All perfectly level. All drifting silently through the forest toward the road. I counted almost 30 before realizing something. Not one beam ever pointed at the ground. They were all aimed directly at us, as if every single light already knew exactly where we stood. Ava accelerated immediately. The truck fishtailed on wet gravel before reaching pavement. Neither of us looked back. 5 minutes later, the radio powered itself back on. Without batteries, without electricity, static filled the cab. Then a calm male voice began speaking. Personnel update. Ranger Morales. Pause. Confirmed. Chief Brooks. Pause. Confirmed. Then, Mason Carter. Long silence. Pending. The radio clicked off. Ava gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. What does pending mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her wallet, pulled out an old folded paper. Not the laminated 7-rule card. This one was yellow, frayed, handwritten. There were 8 rules on it. She stared at the last one for several seconds. then quietly folded it shut again. "What is Rule 8?" I asked. She looked out through the rain. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You only read it after the park starts learning your name." For the rest of the drive, neither of us spoke. The rain hammered against the windshield. The wipers struggled to keep up. Every few seconds, the forest disappeared behind sheets of water, then reappeared again. It felt like the park itself was blinking. I couldn't stop thinking about the radio. Pending. Not approved. Not rejected. Pending. It sounded less like an employee status, and more like a decision someone, or something, hadn't made yet. The following morning, I arrived early. I wanted answers. The station was nearly empty except for Chief Brooks. He stood alone in the equipment room, staring at an old corkboard covered in faded photographs. Most of the pictures showed ranger teams from decades past. Black and white, Polaroids, early digital prints, generations of park staff. I walked over. "Chief." He didn't turn around. Instead, he pointed toward one photograph taken sometime in the early 1980s. There were 9 rangers standing in the picture. 8 wore visible name tags. The 9th man's badge was turned away from the camera. "What about him?" Brooks finally looked at me. "Every picture has one." I frowned. "What?" He walked to another photograph. Different decade, different group. Again, one ranger's face was slightly blurred. Not by age, not by poor focus. It looked as though someone had moved only during the instant the photograph was taken. Another picture. Same thing. Another. Again. Every group photograph had one ranger that no one could clearly identify. I looked back at Brooks. "Who are they?" He answered so quietly I almost missed it. "We've never had the same number of rangers twice." Before I could ask another question, someone entered the room. Ava. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept. She handed Brooks a sealed envelope. I found another one. Brooks didn't open it immediately. Instead, he asked, "Where?" "The old fire cache near Sentinel Dome." He nodded. "I'll take care of it." She noticed me watching. Her expression changed instantly. "Mason, come with me." Outside, we walked nearly 100 yards before she finally spoke. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "Hear what?" "Another one." "What was in the envelope?" She stopped walking. "A badge. A ranger badge." "So, it belonged to someone who's still employed here." I stared at her. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Every few years, someone finds another badge. Always belonging to somebody still on payroll. Always somewhere nobody remembers searching." My skin prickled. "Duplicates?" "No. The originals disappear." That afternoon, Brooks assigned me to inventory an abandoned ranger cabin deep in the Northern District. The cabin hadn't been used since the early 1970s. Simple job. Photograph the interior. Check for storm damage. Report back. Ava insisted on coming. When we arrived, the building looked ready to collapse. The roof sagged, windows covered in dirt. One hinge hung loose on the front door. Inside, everything sat exactly as if someone had walked out yesterday. Coffee mug on the table. Blankets folded neatly. Boots beside the fireplace. Even a jacket still hung beside the door. Dust covered everything, except the boots. They looked freshly cleaned. Ava walked directly to an old filing cabinet. She seemed to know exactly where it was. Without speaking, she pulled open the bottom drawer. Empty, except for one notebook. Leather cover. No title. She opened the first page. The handwriting belonged to another ranger. Daily patrol notes. Weather observations. Wildlife reports. Normal, until the final entries. October 12th. I heard someone walking behind me all night. Never saw them. October 13th. Chief says never stop moving after dark. Didn't explain why. October 14th. The bird stopped again. Counted to 50. It waited. October 15th. I think it learned my voice. October 16th. I heard myself calling from the ridge. The final page wasn't dated. Only one sentence. Written so hard the pen tore through the paper. If you're reading this, don't let it replace Chief Brooks. My heart started racing. I looked at Ava. Replace. She slowly closed the notebook. I hope this wasn't in here. What does it mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward the open cabin door. Someone stood outside, watching us. Chief Brooks. Or Someone who looked exactly like him. Same beard, same jacket, same hat, same posture. He smiled, completely normal. "Mason, we've been looking everywhere for you." I looked at Ava. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. The man outside stepped closer. Rain dripped from his hat. "You two should head back. It's getting dark." His voice was perfect. Every detail matched, even the slight rasp I'd heard every morning. I started toward the door. Ava suddenly grabbed my sleeve. Without looking at me, she whispered, "Ask him." "What?" "The rule." My stomach tightened. Rule 7. If Chief Brooks personally tells you go home, leave immediately. Do not argue. I looked back at the man, then asked the only question I could think of. "Chief, what's today's patrol code?" His smile remained, but it didn't reach his eyes. For almost 5 seconds, he simply stared, then answered, "I don't remember." Every ranger memorized the daily patrol code before leaving the station. Brooks never forgot. Not once. The smile slowly widened. His face stayed perfectly still. Only his mouth moved. "I don't need to remember anymore." At that exact moment, the radio clipped to my vest crackled. The real Chief Brooks shouted so loudly it distorted the speaker. "Mason, do not leave the cabin." My blood turned to ice. I looked outside again. The smiling man was gone. The doorway stood empty. Rain fell quietly over the clearing. Then, slowly, boot prints began appearing in the mud outside, one after another, as if someone invisible had started walking toward the cabin. Except, the footprints stopped just outside the threshold. Whatever was making them couldn't come inside. Not yet. The footprints remained perfectly still for almost a minute. Rain continued falling. Water collected inside each print, but no new ones appeared. It was as if whatever had walked to the cabin was standing only inches beyond the doorway. Watching, waiting. Neither Ava nor I spoke. The only sound inside the cabin was the soft hiss of the radio. Then Chief Brooks' voice returned. "Mason, answer me." I picked up the handset. "We're inside." "Good. Stay there." "What is outside?" A long silence followed. Finally he answered. "It isn't outside. It wants you to think it is." A chill spread through me. What does that mean? It never crosses a doorway. It convinces someone else to invite it across. I slowly looked toward the open cabin door. The footprints still hadn't moved. Brooks spoke again. "Close the door, but don't lock it." Ava hurried over and pushed the old wooden door shut. The cabin instantly felt smaller. Safer, but only for a moment. 3 slow knocks echoed from the other side. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not aggressive. Patient, like someone politely asking to come in. Neither of us moved. A minute passed, then another. The knocking stopped. Instead, a familiar voice drifted through the wood. "Mason." It was my younger sister. She lived nearly 2,000 miles away. There was no possible way she could be standing outside an abandoned ranger cabin in Yosemite. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Ava shook her head. "Don't answer." The voice came again. "Mason, please. I don't like being alone." I closed my eyes. It sounded exactly like her. Every pause, every breath. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She used a childhood nickname only my family knew. I took one involuntary step toward the door. Ava grabbed my wrist. "Hard. It guesses. It gets closer every time. Listen carefully. If it ever sounds perfect, we're already dead." The voice outside changed. My sister disappeared. Now it was my father, then my first search and rescue instructor, then dispatch, then Chief Brooks. One after another, every few seconds, trying different voices, different memories, different emotions. It wasn't choosing randomly. It was searching, trying to find the one voice I trusted enough to open the door. Finally, it stopped. Complete silence. Then, a single sentence, spoken in my own voice. "Let me in." I felt every muscle in my body lock. It wasn't an imitation anymore. It was me. Exactly me. Even my breathing. Even a tiny hesitation before the last word. I had never heard my own voice from outside my own head before. I never wanted to again. After nearly 20 minutes, headlights appeared through the rain. The real Chief Brooks. 3 ranger trucks. 6 armed rangers. The moment their engines stopped, Every footprint outside the cabin disappeared. Not faded, disappeared, as though they had never existed. Brooks entered without saying a word. He looked exhausted, older than he had that morning. His eyes immediately landed on me. "You heard yourself." It wasn't a question. I nodded. He closed his eyes. "I was hoping you hadn't." Nobody spoke during the drive back. When we reached the station, Brooks finally led Ava and me into a locked records room beneath the main office. No windows, concrete walls. One steel cabinet stood alone in the center. He unlocked it with 2 separate keys. Inside were dozens of old Ranger badges. Every badge had a photograph attached. Every photograph belonged to someone listed as still employed. I stared in disbelief. Some of the faces looked impossibly young. Others, I recognized. Luis, Naomi, Ava, even Chief Brooks. Each photograph had a date written beneath it. Some stretched back 30 years. 40. One photograph of Brooks was dated 1988. He looked exactly as he did now, not a day younger. I turned toward him. "How old are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me one final folder. My name was written across the front. I frowned. "I've only worked here a week. Why is there already a file?" He gestured for me to open it. Inside was a photograph, taken yesterday. I stood beside Ava outside the visitor center. Except, there were 3 people in the picture. Me, Ava, and another ranger standing directly behind me. His face was hidden beneath the brim of his hat. I didn't remember anyone standing there. Neither did Ava. Brooks quietly said, "It finally found where to stand." "What does that mean?" He looked at the 7-rule card in my pocket, then slowly removed a second card, the faded one, the one with 8 rules. He placed it on the table. "For 7 rules, you avoid it." He looked directly into my eyes. "But there's one final rule, the only one that truly matters." He turned the card over. At the bottom, beneath the original 7, was a single handwritten sentence. Rule 8. If you ever appear in a photograph with a ranger you cannot remember seeing, do not report for your next shift. Someone else already has. I looked back at the photograph. Slowly, very slowly, the unknown ranger's head had lifted just enough for me to see part of his face. It wasn't hidden anymore. It wasn't a stranger. It was mine, smiling, standing behind myself. I dropped the photograph. When I looked up, everyone else in the room had gone silent. Not because they were staring at me, because they were staring at the empty space just behind my chair. No one spoke. No one turned around. Chief Brooks simply whispered, "Don't acknowledge him." I didn't. I left Yosemite before sunrise. I resigned by email from a motel 3 states away. I burned the uniform, destroyed the badge, changed my phone number, moved twice. For months, I convinced myself I'd escaped. Then last week, an old hiking forum posted photographs from Yosemite's annual ranger reunion. Hundreds of current and former park employees standing together. I didn't recognize most of the faces, but I recognized one, standing in the very back row, half hidden, hands folded behind his back, smiling, wearing a spotless ranger uniform. It looked exactly like mine. And beneath the photograph, the caption read, "Welcome our newest ranger to the Yosemite family." The name underneath wasn't Mason Carter. It was whoever had taken my place.